The bullet that tore through Vincent Calloway's left shoulder in the summer of 1878 convinced him that love, like everything else worth having in this God-forsaken territory, would eventually leave a man bleeding in the dust. He had been riding the Montana Territory range eland for 6 years by then, moving cattle, breaking horses, and keeping his heart as carefully guarded as the gold shipments he sometimes escorted through the mountain passes. At 26 years old, Vincent had seen enough of life's cruelties to know that attachment brought nothing but pain. His own mother had died bringing him into this world, and his father had drunk himself into an early grave trying to forget her. The lesson was clear. Passion burned hot and fast, then left only ashes. The wound in his shoulder came courtesy of a cattle rustler outside of White Pine, Montana, a growing settlement nestled in the valleys where the mountains met endless stretches of grassland. Vincent had tracked the thief for 3 days, recovered the stolen livestock, and taken a bullet for his trouble. The rustler got away, and Vincent barely made it back to town before fever set in. That was how he met Amelia Chambers. He remembered very little of those first 2 days. Fragments of memory drifted through the haze. Being half carried into a whitewashed building, the sharp smell of carbolic acid, cool hands on his burning forehead, and a voice. That voice. It cut through the delirium like a church bell on a clear morning, steady and sure, telling him he was not going to die today. When Vincent finally opened his eyes with any real awareness, he found himself in a narrow bed in what appeared to be a medical office. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. His shoulder throbbed with a deep, angry pain, but the burning fever had broken. He turned his head slowly and saw her. She sat at a desk near the window, her dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, though several rebellious strands had escaped to frame her face. She wore a simple dress of deep green calico, and her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows as she ground something in a mortar with focused intensity. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, he guessed, but there was a confidence in her movements that spoke of experience beyond her years. "You are awake," she said without looking up from her work. "Good. I was beginning to think you would sleep away the entire week." Vincent tried to speak, but his throat felt like he had swallowed sand. She must have heard his attempt because she immediately set down her pestle and poured water from a pitcher into a tin cup. She crossed to him and, with surprising gentleness, helped him sit up enough to drink. The water was the best thing he had ever tasted. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rough and unfamiliar. "You are welcome." She eased him back onto the pillow and studied him with eyes the color of honey in sunlight. "I am Amelia Chambers. My father is the doctor here in White Pine, though he is currently in Helena dealing with a smallpox outbreak. You were brought to us 4 days ago with a bullet wound and significant blood loss." 4 days, Vincent tried to remember. "The cattle were returned to their rightful owner, or so I am told. You did your job, Mr. Calloway. Nearly killed yourself doing it, but you did it." He blinked. "You know my name. The men who brought you in were quite informative. They said you are one of the best ranch hands in the territory. They also said you are stubborn as a mule and have a tendency to take on more than you should." A hint of something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. "The stubbornness, at least, I can confirm. You fought me on every treatment." "I do not remember that." "You were delirious with fever. You kept saying something about not needing help, that you could manage on your own." She returned to her desk and began mixing the ground powder with liquid in a small bottle. "Men like you usually say such things. Men like me, cowboys, drifters. Men who think that needing another person is the same as weakness." She said it matter-of-factly without judgment, but Vincent felt the words land with uncomfortable accuracy. He wanted to argue, but exhaustion pulled at him. His eyes drifted shut despite his best efforts to keep them open. "Sleep," Amelia said, and her voice had softened. "Your body needs rest to heal." Over the following week, Vincent remained in Amelia's care. Her father sent word that the outbreak in Helena was worse than expected and he would be delayed another fortnight at least. Amelia managed the medical practice on her own with a competence that impressed even the skeptical old-timers who came in with their various ailments. Vincent watched her work between his own periods of rest and recovery. She set broken fingers for a ranch hand who had gotten kicked by a horse. She stitched up a boy who had fallen from a tree. She dispensed medicines and advice with equal measure, and she did it all with a calm authority that left no room for doubt. "Where did you learn all this?" Vincent asked one afternoon as she changed the dressing on his shoulder. The wound was healing well, much to his relief. He had full range of motion in his arm, though it still ached fiercely if he moved too quickly. "My mother died when I was 12, Amelia said, her hands steady as she worked. "Influenza." My father threw himself into his practice afterward, and I think he could not bear to be alone in the house. He started taking me with him on calls. At first, I just watched, but gradually he taught me. By the time I was 16, I could handle most basic treatments myself. That is a lot of responsibility for a child. She met his eyes, and he saw something hard and bright there. Responsibility is not something you get to choose in this life, Mr. Calloway. It is something that finds you whether you are ready or not. He could not argue with that. As his strength returned, Vincent found himself looking forward to Amelia's visits to his bedside. At first, he told himself it was simply boredom, the natural restlessness of a man used to action who was forced into inactivity. But as the days passed, he recognized it for what it was. He enjoyed her company. She had a sharp wit that kept him on his toes. When he complained about the bland broth she insisted he eat, she responded that perhaps if he wanted to make decisions about his diet, he should avoid getting shot. When he tried to get out of bed too soon and nearly collapsed, she simply helped him back into bed and said, "Pride is a luxury you cannot afford right now." But there were softer moments, too. She told him about growing up in White Pine, about watching the town grow from a collection of tents and rough cabins into something resembling civilization. She talked about the books she read, borrowed from the small library that the schoolteacher maintained. She described the mountains in winter when they were covered in snow so white it hurt to look at them. Vincent found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. He talked about his father's descent into grief and alcohol. He described the feeling of freedom he had experienced the first time he rode out onto the open range, just him and his horse and endless sky. He even admitted his philosophy about passion and attachment, though saying it aloud to her made it sound hollow somehow. "So you believe that love is not worth the pain it brings?" Amelia asked. They were sitting in the small garden behind the medical office. Vincent was finally strong enough to walk outside, though he tired easily. The summer evening was warm and smelled of wild roses. "I have seen what it does to people," Vincent said. "My father loved my mother so much that losing her destroyed him. He spent the rest of his life trying to drink away the memory of her. He died when I was 14, and his last words to me were her name. What kind of life is that?" Amelia was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "My father loved my mother just as deeply. Losing her nearly broke him too. But he chose differently. He chose to honor her memory by continuing his work, by teaching me, by helping people. The pain of losing her did not make his love for her less real or less valuable. If anything, I think it proved how much she mattered. But he is still alone." "So are you," Amelia said gently. "And you have never loved anyone at all. Which of you do you think has lived more fully?" The question haunted Vincent that night and in the days that followed. He was well enough now to return to the boarding house where he kept a room, well enough to resume light work around the ranch where he was employed. But he found himself making excuses to stop by the medical office. He brought Amelia fresh vegetables from the ranch garden. He repaired a loose board on her porch. He told himself he was simply being neighborly, repaying her kindness. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. The truth made itself undeniable on a September evening when he arrived at the medical office to find Amelia in tears. She was sitting at her father's desk, a letter crumpled in her hand, and she was crying with the kind of quiet desperation that suggested she had been holding back for a long time. Vincent crossed to her without thinking. "What happened?" She looked up at him, and the pain in her eyes made his chest ache. "My father, he contracted smallpox in Helena. He is very ill. But he is a doctor. He will know how to treat himself." "There is no treatment, Vincent. Only hope that the body is strong enough to survive it." Her voice broke. "He is 58 years old. The survival rate for someone his age is not good." Vincent did what he had sworn he would never do. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for just a moment, then collapsed against him, her tears soaking into his shirt. He held her and felt something crack open inside his chest, some carefully constructed wall beginning to crumble. "I cannot lose him," Amelia whispered. "He is all I have left." "You will not lose him," Vincent said, though he had no right to make such a promise. "Your father is strong. He has survived this long in the territory. He will survive this too." He stayed with her that evening, making tea and letting her talk when she needed to and sitting in companionable silence when words were not enough. When he finally left, well past midnight, he walked back to his boarding house through empty streets and admitted to himself what he had been denying for weeks. He was falling in love with Amelia Chambers. The realization terrified him. Everything he believed about himself, every rule he had lived by, was being upended by a woman who ground medicines with steady hands and cried for her father and looked at him like he was more than just a drifter passing through. He did not know what to do with these feelings, how to hold them without being burned, but walking away was not an option. Not now. Not when Amelia needed someone. The next several weeks were a special kind of torture. News from Helena came sporadically, and each letter brought both hope and fear. Amelia's father was alive but gravely ill. He was improving. He had suffered a setback. The disease had run its course, but he was desperately weak. Through it all, Vincent stayed close. He accompanied Amelia on her house calls when she needed someone to drive the wagon. He sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud from her books or simply keeping her company. He learned that she took her coffee with honey, that she hummed while she worked, that she had a habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. He learned that he could spend hours just watching her exist in the world. It was not a sudden, explosive passion like he had always imagined love to be. It was quieter than that, deeper. It was in the way his day felt incomplete if he did not see her. It was in the way her smile could lift his spirits even after the hardest day. It was in the way he found himself thinking about the future, something he had always avoided, and imagining her in it. One evening in late October, as the first snow began to fall on the Montana mountains, Vincent found Amelia in the garden behind the medical office. She was wrapped in a shawl, watching the snowflakes drift down in the fading light. "You will catch cold out here," Vincent said, though he made no move to take her inside. "I needed air. I needed to think." She turned to look at him, and there was something different in her expression, something searching. "Vincent, I need to ask you something. Anything." "Why are you still here?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean? You were healed weeks ago. You could have ridden out, moved on to the next job, the next town. That is what men like you do, but you have stayed." Why? Vincent could have lied. He could have made up excuses about the work at the ranch or the coming winter making travel difficult. But standing there in the snow, with Amelia looking at him with those honey-colored eyes, he found he could not do it. "Because of you," he said simply. "I stayed because of you." Amelia drew in a sharp breath. "Vincent, I know what I said about passion being fleeting. I know I told you that love was not worth the risk, but I was wrong, Amelia. Or maybe I was right about passion in general, but I was not counting on meeting you." He took a step closer to her. "What I feel for you is not fleeting. It is the most permanent thing I have ever known. It terrifies me and it makes me feel more alive than I have ever felt, and I do not know what to do with that." "You could start by kissing me," Amelia said softly. So he did. Her lips were cold from the winter air, but they warmed under his. She tasted like the peppermint tea she favored and something sweeter, something indefinable that was just her. Vincent cupped her face in his hands, careful and reverent, kissing her like she was precious and breakable and the most important thing in the world, because she was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amelia smiled up at him. "I have been hoping you would do that for weeks now." "You have, Vincent. Did you really think I did not notice? I am a trained medical professional. I am quite good at observing symptoms, and you have been showing all the symptoms of a man in love." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "For what it is worth, I have been experiencing the same symptoms. You love me. I did not plan to. You are stubborn and reckless, and you have the most frustrating belief that you have to face everything alone. But yes, Vincent Calloway, I love you. I think I started loving you when you were delirious with fever and still trying to get out of bed to check on those cattle. It was the most idiotic, admirable thing I had ever seen." Vincent laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he had laughed like that, open and genuine? He pulled Amelia close, holding her against his chest, and felt something settle in his soul. Like he had been searching for something his entire life without knowing what it was, and suddenly it had found him. They stood in the garden as the snow fell around them, holding each other, and Vincent thought that maybe his father had been right to love his mother so completely. Maybe the risk of loss was worth this feeling, this rightness that came from finding the person who made the world make sense. News arrived from Helena 2 weeks later. Dr. Chambers had recovered enough to travel and would be returning to White Pine by the end of the month. Amelia cried when she read the letter, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. Vincent held her and thought about the conversation he needed to have with her father. He was not a man given to nervousness, but the prospect of asking Dr. Chambers for permission to court his daughter made Vincent's hands sweat. He barely slept the night before the doctor was due to arrive. Dr. Chambers returned to White Pine on a cold December morning, thinner than he had been and marked by his battle with smallpox, but alive and already complaining about the journey. He embraced Amelia on the porch of the medical office, and Vincent watched from a respectful distance as father and daughter reunited. Later, after Dr. Chambers had rested and eaten and been thoroughly caught up on all the happenings in White Pine during his absence, Vincent requested a private word with him. They sat in the doctor's study, a cramped room lined with medical texts and journals. Dr. Chambers studied Vincent with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "You want to court my daughter," the doctor said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Amelia told me you have been calling on her regularly. She also told me about your rather pessimistic views on love and attachment." Vincent felt heat rise in his face. "I was wrong about that, sir. Your daughter showed me I was wrong. Amelia has a gift for showing people they are wrong. Her mother was the same way." Dr. Chambers leaned back in his chair. "What are your intentions, Mr. Calloway? And please be honest with me. I am too old and too tired for games. I intend to marry her, sir, if she will have me." Vincent met the doctor's gaze steadily. "I know I do not have much to offer. I am a ranch hand with some savings but no property. I move around for work. But I will do whatever it takes to build a life worthy of your daughter. I will work every day for the rest of my life to make her happy. Amelia does not need property or a fancy house. She needs a man who sees her for who she is, who respects her mind and her abilities, who will stand beside her rather than trying to control her. Dr. Chambers paused. Do you know what she wants to do, Mr. Calloway? Sir, my daughter wants to become a doctor. A real doctor, not just an assistant. She wants to attend medical school back east, get proper training, and return here to practice. It is an unconventional dream, especially for a woman, but it is her dream. Can you support that? Vincent had not known about this dream, but hearing it did not surprise him. Of course, Amelia wanted that. It fit everything he knew about her, her competence and her determination and her desire to help people. Yes, he said without hesitation. If that is what she wants, then I support it completely. Dr. Chambers smiled for the first time since Vincent had entered the study. Then you have my blessing to court her, and if things progress as I suspect they will, you will have my blessing for that too. Vincent courted Amelia through the winter and into the spring of 1879. He did it properly, with all the formality that White Pine society expected, but there was nothing formal about the way he felt when she smiled at him, or the way his heart raced when she took his hand. They went on chaperoned walks through town. They attended church services together. They had dinner at the boarding house restaurant, always with Dr. Chambers or another suitable chaperone present. But they also stole moments alone, kisses in the garden behind the medical office, conversations that stretched late into the night, plans and dreams shared in whispers. Vincent told her about his father, really told her this time, including the parts he had always been too ashamed to share. Amelia listened and held his hand, and told him that his father's demons were not his to carry. Amelia told him about her dreams of medical school. She showed him the letters she had already written to the Woman's Medical College of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, one of the few institutions that accepted female students. She talked about her fears that she was not smart enough, not strong enough, not enough in general. Vincent told her she was more than enough. She was everything. In April, he bought a ring. It was simple, just a thin gold band with a small ruby, all he could afford on a ranch hand's wages. But he had saved for months and he thought it was beautiful. He hoped Amelia would think so too. He proposed on a Sunday afternoon in the garden where they had first kissed. The cherry tree was in bloom, filling the air with the scent of flowers, and the sky was that particular shade of blue that only existed in Montana in the spring. Vincent got down on one knee in the grass. Amelia Chambers, I came to this town believing that passion was fleeting and love was a risk not worth taking. You proved me wrong about everything. You showed me that what is fleeting can become eternal if you choose it, if you commit to it, if you wake up every day and decide that this person is worth it. You are worth it. You are worth everything. Will you marry me? Amelia looked down at him with tears in her eyes. Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him to his feet and kissed him there in the garden while the cherry blossoms drifted around them like snow. They were married in June, in the small church at the center of White Pine. It was a simple ceremony, nothing fancy, but half the town turned out for it. The ranch hands Vincent worked with were there, dressed in their Sunday best and grinning like fools. The families Amelia had treated over the years filled the pews, bringing flowers and well wishes and enough food for a feast. Dr. Chambers walked Amelia down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright. She wore a dress of white lace that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit her by the seamstress in town. She carried wildflowers that Vincent had picked that morning from the meadow outside town. She was the most beautiful thing Vincent had ever seen. They spoke their vows in front of everyone, promises to love and honor and cherish each other through whatever life brought. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed his bride and felt a completeness he had never imagined possible. The reception was held in the town square, with tables of food and music from a fiddle player and dancing that lasted until well after dark. Vincent danced with his wife, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair and thinking that this was happiness. This was what his father had been chasing at the bottom of all those bottles. This was what made life worth living. Later, much later, they went to the small house Vincent had rented on the edge of town. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. He carried Amelia over the threshold, and she laughed, the sound filling the space with joy. That night, Vincent showed his wife with his body what he had been telling her with words for months: that she was precious, that she was desired, that she was loved beyond measure. Amelia showed him the same, her touch gentle and sure, her voice whispering his name in the darkness. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, skin against skin, hearts beating in rhythm. Vincent traced patterns on Amelia's bare shoulder and felt at peace in a way he had never experienced before. "I love you," he said into the quiet. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "I will hold you to that promise," Amelia replied, pressing a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "We have a lot of days ahead of us." They fell into married life with surprising ease. Vincent continued his work at the ranch, though he took fewer risks now. He had someone to come home to, someone who would worry if he did not return. That knowledge changed something in him, made him more cautious, more careful. Amelia continued working at the medical office alongside her father. She also continued her studies, spending her evenings reading medical texts and writing letters to the medical college in Philadelphia. Dr. Chambers was getting older, and his illness in Helena had taken a toll. Both he and Amelia knew that eventually White Pine would need a new doctor. Vincent supported her studies however he could. He read aloud to her from her textbooks, helping her memorize anatomy and treatments. He quizzed her on symptoms and diagnoses. He believed in her dream as fiercely as she did. In the autumn of 1879, Amelia received a letter from the Woman's Medical College of Pennsylvania. She had been accepted for the following year's class. She stood in their kitchen holding the letter, tears streaming down her face. "I got in. Vincent, I actually got in." Vincent picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "Of course you got in. You are brilliant. They would be fools not to accept you." But the acceptance brought complications. The program was in Philadelphia, over 2,000 miles away. It would take 3 years to complete. That meant Amelia would have to leave White Pine, leave her father, leave Vincent. "You have to go," Vincent said when they discussed it that night. "This is your dream, you have to go. But what about us? What about our marriage? We will make it work. I will write to you every week. I will visit when I can. And when you graduate, you will come back here and you will be Dr. Amelia Calloway, and I will be the proudest man in Montana." Amelia cupped his face in her hands. "You would really let me go? You would wait for me for 3 years?" "You are not asking my permission, Amelia. This is your decision. But if you are asking if I support you, if I will be here when you return, then yes. Absolutely yes. I told you what is fleeting can become eternal if you choose it. I choose you. I choose us. Today, tomorrow, 3 years from now. Always." They made love that night with a bittersweet intensity, knowing that their time together was suddenly limited. Vincent memorized every inch of his wife's body, storing up memories for the lonely nights ahead. Amelia held him like she could brand the feeling of him into her skin. Amelia left for Philadelphia in January of 1880. Saying goodbye at the train station was one of the hardest things Vincent had ever done. He held her until the very last moment, kissing her one final time before she boarded the train. 3 years, she said, her hands clutching his coat. "It is only 3 years. 3 years," Vincent agreed, "and then forever after that." He stood on the platform and watched the train disappear into the distance, carrying his wife away from him. The cold January wind cut through his coat, but he barely felt it. He felt hollowed out, empty, like something essential had been carved from his chest. Walking back to their house that evening was torture. It was too quiet without Amelia's humming, too still without her presence. Vincent sat at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands and allowed himself one moment of weakness, one moment to feel the full weight of her absence. Then he stood up, wiped his eyes, and went to his desk. He had promised to write to her every week, and he would keep that promise. He pulled out paper and pen and began the first of what would become hundreds of letters. The next 3 years tested Vincent in ways he had never anticipated. The physical separation was hard, but manageable. What was harder was the loneliness, the constant ache of missing her, the way everything reminded him of Amelia. He threw himself into work, taking extra shifts at the ranch, volunteering to break the difficult horses, doing anything to keep busy. At night, he read her letters over and over, memorizing every word. She wrote about her classes, about the other women in her program, about the incredible things she was learning. Her excitement leaped off the page, and Vincent was happy for her, truly happy, even as he missed her desperately. He wrote back about life in White Pine, about the changing seasons, about the little details he thought would make her smile. He wrote about how much he loved her, how proud he was of her, how he counted down the days until she would return. In the summer of 1880, Vincent traveled to Philadelphia to visit her. The journey took weeks and cost most of his savings, but seeing Amelia's face when she met him at the train station made it all worthwhile. They had 5 precious days together, walking through the city, talking for hours, relearning each other after months apart. Their reunion in the small room Amelia rented near the college was passionate and desperate and beautiful. They made love with the intensity of people who knew their time was limited, savoring every touch, every kiss, every moment of connection. "I miss you every single day," Amelia whispered against his skin. "There are times when I am not sure I can do this, when I think about leaving school and coming home to you." "Do not," Vincent said fiercely. "Do not give up on this, Amelia. You are so close. You are going to be an incredible doctor." "I love you," she said. "I love you so much it hurts." "I love you too, and this is not forever. We can survive 3 years. We are stronger than that." When he left Philadelphia, Vincent felt both better and worse. Better because he had seen Amelia, held her, confirmed that what they had was real and enduring. Worse because leaving her a second time somehow hurt more than the first. But they endured. Through 1880, through 1881, through 1882. They wrote their letters and counted the days and held onto each other across the impossible distance. Vincent worked at the ranch and helped doctor Chambers at the medical office when needed. The older man's health was declining steadily, and Vincent knew Amelia worried about him. In March of 1883, Amelia sent a telegram. She had passed her final examinations. She was graduating. She was coming home. Vincent stood in the telegraph office reading those words over and over, a grin spreading across his face. 3 years. They had survived 3 years apart, and now his wife was coming home. He met her at the train station on a bright April morning. She stepped off the train carrying a worn medical bag and wearing a travel-stained dress, and she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Vincent crossed the platform in 4 long strides and swept her into his arms, kissing her there in front of everyone. "Welcome home, Doctor." "Calloway," he said against her lips. Amelia laughed and cried at the same time. "I missed you. God, Vincent, I missed you so much. I missed you too, every day, every single day." They went home to the little house on the edge of town, and Vincent carried her over the threshold again, just like he had on their wedding night. They made love in their bed, relearning each other after 3 years apart, and it was like coming home in every sense of the word. Later, lying wrapped in each other's arms, Amelia told him about her plans. She would take over the medical practice from her father, who was more than ready to retire. She would be the first female doctor in White Pine, possibly in all of Montana Territory. There would be challenges, she knew. Not everyone would accept her, but she was ready. "I am so proud of you," Vincent said, running his fingers through her hair. It was longer than it had been when she left, falling past her shoulders in auburn waves. "You did it. You actually did it. We did it," Amelia corrected. "I could not have done this without you, without your support. You gave me the freedom to chase my dream. That is not a small thing, Vincent. You would have done it with or without me. You are that strong. Maybe. But it was easier because I knew you were waiting for me. Because I knew I had a home to come back to." Dr. Chambers retired officially in May, handing over the practice to his daughter in a small ceremony attended by most of the town. He gave a speech about how proud he was of Amelia, about how she had surpassed even his considerable skills, about how White Pine was lucky to have her. Vincent stood in the back of the room and watched his wife accept the responsibility she had worked so hard for, and his heart felt like it might burst from pride. Amelia thrived as White Pine's doctor. Yes, there were people who doubted her at first, who muttered that women had no business in medicine. But Amelia proved herself over and over. She delivered babies and set bones and treated fevers and illnesses with a skill that silenced even her harshest critics. Vincent supported her however he could. He drove her to house calls when the weather was bad. He kept the medical office in good repair. He held her when she lost patience, because that was inevitable in their line of work, and he celebrated with her when treatments succeeded beyond expectations. Their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent continued working at the ranch, though he had been promoted to foreman, overseeing the other hands and managing the day-to-day operations. The pay was better, which allowed them to save money and make improvements to their house. In the fall of 1883, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent over dinner one evening, simply stating it as a fact the way she might diagnose a patient. "I am with child, about 8 weeks along by my estimation." Vincent dropped his fork. "You are pregnant?" "Yes." "We are going to have a baby." "That is typically what pregnancy leads to, yes." But Amelia was smiling, her eyes bright with excitement and fear and joy all mixed together. Vincent got up from the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, like she was made of glass. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, and this time it was not a question but a statement of wonder. Their son was born in May of 1884, after a long and difficult labor that terrified Vincent even though Amelia assured him, between contractions, that everything was progressing normally. Dr. Chambers assisted with the delivery, coming out of retirement for this one special occasion. When Vincent finally got to hold his son, a tiny red-faced bundle with a surprising amount of dark hair, he felt something shift in his understanding of the world. He had thought he understood love when he married Amelia, but this was different, bigger somehow. This was his child, his son, a tiny person who would depend on him for everything. "What should we name him?" Amelia asked from the bed. She looked exhausted but radiant, her hair damp with sweat, her smile incandescent. They had discussed names, of course, but had not made a final decision. Vincent looked down at his son and said, "William. William Chambers Calloway, after your father." Amelia's eyes filled with tears. Dr. Chambers, standing in the corner of the room, looked away and cleared his throat roughly. "William," Amelia repeated. "I think that is perfect." Fatherhood changed Vincent in ways he had not expected. He had always been responsible, always done his work and kept his commitments. But now, there was this small person whose entire world was his parents, whose needs came before everything else. Vincent cut back his hours at the ranch, wanting to spend more time at home. He became an expert at soothing crying fits, at changing diapers, at the particular way William liked to be held when he was fussy. He sang off key lullabies and walked the floor at 3 in the morning, and discovered a capacity for tenderness he had not known he possessed. Amelia balanced her medical practice with motherhood, and Vincent marveled at her ability to manage both. She would deliver a baby at 2 in the morning, come home and nurse William, catch a few hours of sleep, and then be back at the medical office by mid-morning. She made it look effortless, though Vincent knew it was anything but. "How do you do it?" he asked her one evening. They were sitting on their front porch watching the sun set over the mountains. William was asleep in Amelia's arms, his tiny fist curled against her chest. "Do what?" "All of it. The practice, being a mother, being my wife. You make it all look so easy." Amelia laughed softly. "It is not easy, Vincent. It is the hardest thing I have ever done. But it is also the most rewarding. I get to help people heal, and I get to raise our son, and I get to do it all with you by my side. That makes the hard parts bearable." William grew into a curious, energetic toddler who kept both his parents on their toes. He had Amelia's auburn hair and Vincent's gray eyes, and a stubborn streak he seemed to have inherited from both of them. Vincent taught him to ride, starting with a gentle old mare from the ranch, and delighted in his son's fearlessness. In 1886, Amelia announced she was pregnant again. Their daughter, Catherine, was born in March of 1887, and she was different from William from the start. Where William was loud and active, Catherine was quiet and observant, watching the world with solemn blue eyes. Vincent fell in love all over again with this tiny girl who looked so much like her mother. He was, he realized, surrounded by incredible women. His wife, his daughter, even his mother-in-law's memory lived on in the stories Dr. Chambers told. Vincent had spent so long believing that needing people was weakness, but he had been wrong. Being needed by his children, being loved by his wife, that was not weakness. That was the source of his strength. Dr. Chambers passed away peacefully in his sleep in the summer of 1888. He was 67 years old and had spent more than 40 years serving as White Pine's doctor. The entire town turned out for his funeral. Amelia eulogized her father, her voice steady despite her tears, talking about his dedication to healing and his unwavering support of her dreams. Vincent held her that night as she grieved, and he thought about his own father, dead before Vincent could truly know him. But Vincent was determined to be different. He would live to see his children grow up. He would be present in their lives. He would show them every day that they were loved and valued. Life continued its steady march forward. William started school in 1890, learning his letters and numbers from the schoolteacher. Catherine followed in 1893, proving to be as brilliant as her mother. Vincent had been promoted again at the ranch, now serving as assistant manager to the owner, a position that came with better pay and more respect. Amelia's medical practice continued to grow. She had built a reputation not just in White Pine but throughout the surrounding area. People traveled for days to see her, trusting her skill and her judgment. She trained 2 young women as nurses, passing on her knowledge the way her father had passed it on to her. In 1895, Amelia became pregnant for the 3rd time, a surprise as they had thought they were done having children. Their second son, James, was born in December, a Christmas baby who brought unexpected joy into their lives. Vincent was 43 now, old enough to feel the years in his bones some mornings, but he had never been happier. He would look around at his family, at his wife and their 3 children, and feel overwhelming gratitude. "You remember what you told me when we first met?" Amelia asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch again, a habit they had maintained through all the years. William was 16 now, tall and strong, already talking about following his father into ranch work. Catherine was 12, quiet and studious, showing signs that she might follow her mother into medicine. James was playing in the yard, chasing fireflies in the summer twilight. "I told you a lot of things," Vincent said, "most of them foolish. You said that passion was fleeting, That love was not worth the risk. Amelia took his hand, her fingers lacing through his. Do you still believe that? Vincent looked at his wife, at the silver threading through her auburn hair, at the laugh lines around her eyes, at the capable hands that had healed so many people and held their children and touched him with such tenderness for so many years. No, he said. I was wrong about that. What I thought was fleeting became eternal. Every day I choose you, and that makes it eternal. Every moment we build together, every challenge we face, every joy we share, it all adds up to something permanent, something that will outlast both of us. I love you, Vincent Calloway, Amelia said. I loved you when you were a stubborn cowboy who thought he knew everything about life. I loved you through 3 years apart. I loved you through late nights with crying babies and difficult deliveries, and all the 1,000 little challenges of building a life together. And I will love you until the day I die and beyond that if heaven allows it. Vincent pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and sure, a kiss that contained 20 years of marriage and partnership and love. And I will love you just as long. You showed me what love could be, Amelia. You showed me that it is not about the fear of loss, but about the courage to commit anyway. You made me brave enough to feel this much. They sat on the porch as the summer evening darkened into night, watching their youngest son chase fireflies, listening to their older children's voices drift from inside the house. And Vincent thought about the journey that had brought him here. He had been shot and left bleeding in the dust, convinced that attachment brought only pain. He had been so certain that he knew how life worked, that he had it all figured out. Then he met a young woman with auburn hair and honey-colored eyes who told him he was wrong. And she had been right. She had been right about everything. Years continued to pass, each one adding to the richness of their story. William married a rancher's daughter in 1899 and gave Vincent and Amelia their first grandchild in 1900, a boy named Vincent after his grandfather. Catherine did indeed follow her mother into medicine, leaving for the same medical college in Philadelphia in 1901. Unlike her mother, she had her father and her medical training to come home to, and she returned to White Pine in 1904 to practice alongside Amelia. James showed an aptitude for horses that rivaled his father's. By the time he was 20, he was breaking and training horses for ranches throughout Montana, which had gained statehood in 1889. Vincent retired from ranch work in 1905 at the age of 53. His body was tired, marked by decades of hard labor, but he had no regrets. He spent his days helping at the medical office, doing repairs and managing supplies, being useful to his wife and daughter in their important work. Amelia continued practicing medicine well into her 60s, only slowing down when her hands started to shake too much for delicate work. She trained her daughter and 2 other young doctors, ensuring that White Pine would continue to have excellent medical care. In 1918, as the world was gripped by the influenza pandemic that had killed so many, Vincent and Amelia sat on their porch once again. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their bodies marked by time and hard use, but their love had not diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger, deeper, tempered by decades of partnership. "We have had a good life," Amelia said. The evening was warm, the first real warmth after a long winter. "Better than I could have imagined when you were lying in that bed with a bullet wound, fighting me on every treatment," Vincent laughed. "I was an idiot. You were scared. There is a difference." She took his hand, the same gesture she had made 1,000 times before, and he marveled that it could still make his heart skip. "But you let yourself be brave. That is what matters." Their children were grown now, living their own lives, giving Vincent and Amelia grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. William managed one of the largest ranches in Montana. Catherine was one of the most respected doctors in the state. James had started his own horse breeding operation. They had built good lives, all of them, and Vincent knew he and Amelia had given them the foundation to do so. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked. "Giving up those years in Philadelphia to come back here. You could have stayed east, practiced in a big city." "Never," Amelia said firmly. "My life is here. It has always been here. White Pine needed a doctor and I needed you. There is nothing to regret." Vincent kissed her temple, gentle and reverent. "Thank you for proving me wrong about love. Thank you for being patient with me while I learned. Thank you for being willing to learn. Not every man would have been." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Montana sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Vincent thought about the scared young cowboy he had been, so certain that caring about people would only lead to pain. That man seemed like a stranger now, because Amelia had been right. Passion did not have to be fleeting. It could become eternal if you chose it, if you worked at it, if you woke up every day and decided that this person, this life, was worth fighting for. Vincent Calloway had spent 40 years proving that truth. He had spent 40 years loving his wife, raising their children, building a life that mattered. And he would spend whatever time he had left doing the same. The fleeting had become eternal. The temporary had become permanent. And the cowboy who thought he knew everything about love had learned the most important lesson of all. Love was not something that happened to you. It was something you chose, every single day with every action and word and gesture. Vincent squeezed Amelia's hand and felt her squeeze back. They sat together on their porch, two people who had built something beautiful out of a chance meeting and a bullet wound and a stubborn refusal to give up on each other. The stars came out one by one, filling the Montana sky with light. And Vincent Calloway, former cowboy, husband, father, grandfather, sat with his wife and knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Years later, in 1925, Vincent passed away peacefully at the age of 73, surrounded by his family. Amelia held his hand as he drew his last breath, and the last thing he saw was her face, still beautiful to him, still the most important thing in his world. "I love you," he whispered. "And I love you," she replied. "Always." Amelia lived for 3 more years, long enough to see her youngest great-grandchild born, long enough to know that her family would continue to thrive. She passed away in her sleep in 1928 at the age of 72, a peaceful end to a life well lived. They were buried side by side in the White Pine Cemetery, under the shadow of the mountains they had both loved. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that bore their names and dates and the inscription, "Together, eternally." Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried on their legacy. Catherine continued her mother's medical practice. William's descendants became prominent ranchers in Montana. James's horse breeding operation became known throughout the West. But more than their professional achievements, Vincent and Amelia left behind a legacy of love. They had shown their family what it meant to choose each other every day, to support each other's dreams, to build something lasting out of the temporary nature of human existence. The little house on the edge of White Pine where they had built their life together stood for many more years. Future generations would walk past it and tell the story of the cowboy and the doctor, the man who thought passion was fleeting and the woman who showed him that love could be eternal. It became a legend in White Pine, the kind of story people told to give them hope, to remind them that love was worth fighting for. Young couples would visit their graves, touching the headstones and making wishes for their own relationships to be as strong, as enduring, as eternal. Because Vincent and Amelia had proven something important, that love was not about grand gestures or passionate declarations alone. It was about the daily choice to stay, to commit, to work through challenges together. It was about supporting each other's dreams even when it was hard. It was about building something brick by brick, day by day, year by year, until you looked back and realized you had created something that would last beyond your lifetime. The cowboy had thought passion was fleeting, but with her, fleeting became eternal, and that made all the difference. Their story lived on in White Pine, passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love and commitment and the courage to believe that what seems temporary can become permanent if you are willing to fight for it. Vincent and Amelia Calloway had lived and loved and built something beautiful, and though they were gone, their legacy remained, as eternal as the mountains that overlooked the town they had called home. The Wild West that Vincent had ridden through as a young man faded into history, replaced by modern conveniences and changing times. But some things remained constant: the need for love, the desire for connection, the hope that passion could be more than just a fleeting moment. Vincent and Amelia had proven it could be. They had taken a chance meeting in a medical office and turned it into 40 years of marriage, 3 children, numerous grandchildren, and a love story that inspired everyone who heard it. And so their story ended, not with tragedy or loss, but with fulfillment and completion. They had lived fully. They had loved completely. They had proven that even the most cynical heart could learn to believe in forever. The cowboy thought passion was fleeting. Then fleeting became eternal with her. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered.